Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. In episode 30, we will be dipping in the drink. First, we'll discuss alcoholism in the food and beverage industries. Next, Rattled by Radlers. What's up with the beer spritz craze? And finally, the surprising role that water plays in wineries, breweries, and distilleries. Here in the studios of OPB, I'm joined by Hannah Wallace, a journalist covering food, wine, agriculture for publications such as Vogue and Civil Eats. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
And Jeff Alworth, author of Secrets of the Master Brewers, The Beer Bible, and Cider Made Simple. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
And Andy Kryza, senior editor at Thrillist. Hey there, Andy.
Thanks for having me.
And now let's talk alcohol abuse on the floor. For those working in the restaurant industry, a highly addictive substance is easily accessible at all times. That substance is alcohol. Hannah Wallace, you wrote a fascinating article on this topic for the online beverage publication 750 Daily recently. So I want to start with you. I did not know that the hospitality industry is the profession with the highest rate of substance abuse. Is that true?
It is, yeah. And after construction is the second, which I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, I was surprised by how many people were willing to talk to me quite honestly about their experiences with alcoholism. I didn't get to talk to anyone who is currently an alcoholic. No one really wanted to talk about that. But I do think that the stigma is falling away in the sense that there are more people coming out and openly talking about it and staying in the industry. That's kind of what surprised me. So working at being a bartender, but being a sober bartender.
That has got to be torture.
Yeah, that's what I would think. But I think a lot of people, the people I talked to in the article, Joe Gonzalez of Suffolk Arms in New York City, for example, felt like they weren't loving their jobs when they were drinking too much. And so once they got that under control and were able to stop drinking completely, now they love their jobs again. Now they love the service industry more, and they're actually able to be a better boss and a better bartender. And in some cases, they even taste the drinks, but don't swallow them.
That is amazing to me. I feel like the aroma would drive you crazy if you couldn't have a sip.
I know that was only one person I talked to does that, but I've heard of sommeliers who do that, who taste and spit all the time.
Yeah, actually, a very famous MW, Master of Wine, Tim Hani, I think is how you pronounce his name, has been sober for like 30 years and works in the industry. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you know any brewers who don't drink?
I don't, and that sommelier story is amazing to me. I can't believe that. That would be quite a thing to have wine in your mouth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I mostly cover craft beer, and I talk to the people mostly who make it, not who serve it or deliver it. It's interesting. There's more, I think. Craft beer is, it's a little bit like wine. It's not a thing that people use to get drunk. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the rap. And yet you have people around beer all day, and it's always appropriate to drink it if you're with a brewer.
That's kind of what I heard. And in a way, it was funny because when I started reporting this, you said you were surprised. I wasn't very surprised because I think, when you're in this culture, when you work at a bar, when you work at a restaurant, you're surrounded by alcohol. And as Joe Gonzalez told me, everyone you're around, like your best friends are bartenders. You have top shelf spirits at your, right at your hand, and wine and beer. And so I think it just becomes normal. It's like part of the culture. You just drink after work. I was a waitress for a summer once in D.C. and I remember after we left the restaurant, and some of us had been drinking while we were still at the restaurant. Don't tell our boss, but I'm sure that happens a lot. And then you'd go out drinking afterwards, and that was part of the culture. You would just go out for like an hour until like 1 in the morning drinking. So.
And even if you're a winemaker or a brewer or a distiller, even if you're not out partying with the wait staff and the bartenders, you are expected to be out on the road, wining and dining possible clients, possible customers.
True.
And so I'm sure those folks are having to drink every night as well.
Yeah. And that was another part of the story. I didn't only focus on people who are former alcoholics who are now sober, but just the sort of mindful drinking that I think a lot of us have experienced at a certain point. I know I've reached that age where, I don't sleep as well when I drink more than 2 glasses of wine a night. And so you sort of start to realize what your level is. And then, like, if you have to do tastings during the day, I spoke to a sommelier from Chicago who said basically she never doesn't spit because if she did, she would be drunk, and she doesn't want to be drunk at her job. And then she also looks forward to her 1 glass of wine every night with her husband before bed. And just to have that to look forward to as opposed to drinking 3 glasses of wine throughout the day and then feeling like, oh, I can't.
Yeah, the day drinking always ends up with a headache.
Right.
Andy, have you come across this? You cover a lot of bars all over the country for Thrillist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the lifestyle of the service industry doesn't just start and stop with the people that are in front of you. It's in the back of the house. It's the servers, the dishwashers, everyone involved in it. But from the top down, it comes from this new culture that we have where chefs are rock stars, bartenders are rock stars. And as such, they're expected to be out, in the limelight, canoodling, as they don't say anymore, kind of ripping it up and being the face of this almost, unattainable celebrity status in a lot of places. And that takes a toll on people, especially when it's constantly being thrust in your face. There's free drinks at every single event. You go to a food festival and people are shotgunning beers. I can imagine it's extremely cumbersome. And that's why I've started to see a lot more bartenders and chefs drinking non-alcoholic beer behind the bar, which is really great. They're probably keeping NA beer afloat. And it lets them kind of feel like they're part of it without, necessarily indulging, which is crazy fascinating to me.
Yeah. One of the people in my article who I interviewed was a publicist who works with food and beverage clients, and she says she always goes to events because she loves to network, and she always has her seltzer water. And she's like, no one notices. She can count on one hand the number of people who've said, oh, why aren't you drinking? You think everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, you're not drinking. But in fact, people are paying more attention to themselves than they are to other people. So
which is
they're
just
not going to
always
assume you're
true
pregnant or alcoholic. They're just going to ignore it, just not even notice.
Yeah. There's also the effect where if you're at a party and you're not drinking, there's some sort of residual drunken feeling you get from the fact that everyone else is sort of weaving around and laughing too much.
Yeah, make the most of that.
Well, and it's interesting, you were talking about spitting with cocktails and wine, but you don't spit in the beer. Like if you're tasting beer, you don't spit ever, right, Jeff?
That's right. I actually think spitting in general is less rich sensory experience. In beer, we always talk about aftertaste. So when you swallow the beer, you get the volatile aromatics that continue to evolve in the mouth, and you get a different sense of the beer once you swallow. You can also tell the texture a little bit better when you swallow. But beer is a lot lower alcohol, so this is the big thing. If you're drinking wine, it's 2 or 3 times as strong. So with beer, you can afford to have small drinks, and I've judged a lot of beer, and we'll do flights of 10 beers, and we'll do 3 or 4 of those flights in a day. And you can do that, and actually you kind of feel gross, but you don't get really very drunk because it's not that much alcohol. The alcohol units are not so high.
It's funny that the classy world of wine is the one where it's acceptable to spit in a bucket in public.
I know. I always have a problem with that personally.
Well, I was going to say I'm really jealous. I think I want to do a beer competition because wine competitions, you said 3 or 4 flights of 10 in a day. I feel like we do like 25, 30 flights in a day at a typical wine competition. And even though you're spitting, your head is still spinning because it's like soaking in through your palate somehow. And it's an awful experience. And then you always end up with a headache. I feel like these alcohol professions, everyone thinks they sound really wonderful and fun, but they're not easy, folks.
It's not easy, exactly. It's not easy getting drunk during the day.
Well, maybe this is a good time to transition to our second course, Rattled by Radlers. One way to cut down on your alcohol consumption is to make a spritz. Over the past year or so, we've seen increasing numbers of beer spritzes, in particular, being sold in cans. Jeff Alworth, you are the author of the Beer Bible, so I think you should give us the lay of the land. What is a Radler? What's a Shandy? And why are these so popular right now?
So beer is a cool subject to cover because there's always a story behind anything. If you just pick point to any beer or any person in beer, there's always a cool story. So there's a cool story behind Radler. I wrote this down because I didn't want to get the details wrong. Back in 1922 in Bavaria, there was this Gast house run by a man named Franz Kugler, and he had they made a dark beer called Dunkellager there. And for whatever reason, you also have to question whether these are all apocryphal. There's some things that give me pause about this, but we're going with it. I think this is the typical story. He was apparently low on beer. This is one of those red flags. Doesn't make a lot of sense why a Bavarian would be low on beer. And it was in Bavaria in the summer, and there was a bike race that day. And he realized he was going to have a ton of traffic through the pub. So he went to his basement and found a bunch of lemon lime soda and blended the lemon lime soda with the Dunkellager and made Radler, which German speakers tell me is the word for cyclist in German. And thus was born Radler. So that's probably some. Actually, I've heard other versions where it's an Austrian. So some version of this is probably true. Like it does exist, so there was some story. But
so it's sparkling lemonade, not like just lemonade.
It's like 1920s Sprite.
Yeah, it's like 1920s Sprite. Yeah, like a phosphate probably.
I always thought it was
know.
lemonade mixed with beer.
Yeah, people make that mistake. The
Or is
version.
that a shandy?
Yeah, so there's a really similar version called a shandy that's made in England, and if you Google it online, it'll often say lemonade, but the lemonade that they're talking about is like a soda. It's a sparkling soda, and it's much less tart. So that you need to get that balance right.
I think it's very fitting. Did we all ride our bikes here? Or three of us ride our bikes here?
I'm not allowed to ride a bike.
Oh, okay. I love that story just matches up with our experience getting here in the warm autumn sun.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. So why are they suddenly appearing in cans in gourmet groceries? I feel like I see them everywhere.
Well, they have been around for a long time, and they have heyday. So they come and go and have come and go over the decades in different parts of the world. I think the beer industry is driven by novelty, and every few years, you need to have a new product to offer people. Summer is the time when most beer is sold. Something like nearly half the beer is sold during the summer, and so it's always an opportunity to offer people something new. And a Radler is a perfect summer beer because it's a little bit lower alcohol, more refreshing, goes with outdoor sports and activities more easily. So a few breweries put out, larger national breweries put out some Radlers and Shandies a few years ago now. This trend has been going on for a little while, and people liked it. So
what is the difference between a Radler and a Shandy? This has always been driving me nuts, and I pretend to write about beer sometimes, and so even it eludes even me.
I don't think there's a difference. I think they're categories, and if you were to go to England, I think you'd probably find different kinds of shandies. Same with Germany. In fact, I wrote down some of the names they have. A Russ is made with Weiss beer, so the German wheat beer, mixed with the lemon lime soda. There's a thing called a Diesel, which is different in both England and Germany. In England, it is lager, cider, and blackcurrant syrup. But in Germany, it's lager and soda, as opposed to, I think, like a Helles or a Dunkel.
And those are still considered Radlers. They're just different types of Radlers?
They're called Diesels. So I think
different.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing where you could blend. And if you actually go deep into the internet and look at all the different cocktails and combinations people have had, they have all different kinds of names. And I think these things will appear periodically in a city or at a bar, and somebody will come up with their own concoction, and it'll be popular for a while, and then usually die off, I think.
Well, when you mentioned the blackcurrant syrup, Jeff, you made me think of the Kir and the Kir Royale, the famous wine. I guess they aren't really spritzes. You just put creme de cassis in white wine to make a Kir, and then a Kir Royale. The brand Chambord, I think it's black raspberry liqueur, has kind of taken that cocktail over. But I was thinking about wine spritzes, and beer spritzes seem to be like they cut the alcohol in half by putting juice or something in there. Wine spritzes get you more drunk.
Although there is a Radler that's being put out as a Radler, which is Riesling, right? Have you seen that, the Union?
The Union one.
But they're calling it a Radler, so that confuses me. Is that considered like technically, is that a Radler?
Well, it's also hopped too, right?
Oh, that's why.
I think so. But it's a Riesling Radler with...
Yeah, that's it. You have it.
I have some.
Yeah.
Oh, heavens.
Oregon Riesling, hops and malt, grapefruit.
So that would probably be a lower alcohol option if you wanted a wine spritzer,
Wait,
right?
what? Hops and malt, grapefruit and wine?
What is
that? What is that abomination you're holding?
This is maybe we should take a little break and taste what our show and tell that all brought today.
I'm sure it's great, and for the company that made that, I apologize. But as a beer guy, I'm taken aback.
An Oregon company, Union Wine Company. The label's called Underwood Riesling Radler. So I'll pour some of this for you guys.
It's a beautiful bottle.
Or it's a can.
I mean, that's what I meant.
Yeah, they've been at the forefront of the beerification of wine, so it actually doesn't come as too much of a surprise to see it. Woo!
Yeah, just by canning.
Yeah.
Well, I also brought some Radler made by a local brewery called Hopworks, which has been making it for a while.
Great.
They're known for their bike-themed pubs, so it's kind of appropriate for them to have Radlers.
Yeah, their can is really cute.
What do you guys think of the Riesling Radler?
To me, it tastes a little more like a soda than wine.
It really does, yeah. I'm getting like the subtle suggestion of wine and beer. I don't know. I think that stuff like this has when you put Radler or Shandy on something, it has a tendency to evoke kind of more snobbish elements. And when you think about it, the most popular shandy in America is Leinenkrugel out of Wisconsin, which, is chugged at tailgates.
Oh.
So I think it's one of the more popular Midwestern beers, in fact, for the summer. It's the Oberon of Wisconsin.
I kind of feel like, and this is just supposition, but I remember when I was in high school and no one really liked the taste of alcohol, and they were always drinking wine coolers and stuff like that. Kind of reminds me of that in the sense that it's like kind of like soda. So if you're not really into drinking, but you want to try and get a little tipsy, you might try.
This seems like it would do the trick.
Yeah, the wine one really has that. I was having flashbacks to high school too. That I, not necessarily that I drank this in high school myself, but
well, in Germany, I've spent some time in Bavaria. Actually, I had a Bavarian boyfriend at a certain point, and I remember being there once for Oktoberfest, and just that the kids all drank Radlers. Like that wasn't strange. I mean, I guess they probably drink beer too, but I mean, it was kind of normal for them to have Radlers because it was like so low alcohol, and it was assumed that they would drink beer eventually anyway, so it wasn't a big deal.
Like what age kids?
10, 11, 12, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I also brought our anniversary sponsor, Blossom Brothers, makes a wine spritzer that's botanical-infused white wine. It's actually Riesling from the Columbia Valley. And I brought 2 flavors that we can try, and you guys can tell me how they compare to Radler's. One flavor is white peach and jasmine flower, and the other is blood orange and ginger root.
On hot days, I don't know if this is true with other I don't know if it's true with the wine, but it's definitely the case that the residual sugar and alcohol, the mouthfeel, becomes exaggerated in warm weather. So you can have a kind of mid-strength beer and it'll feel very heavy. Huh. Flavors feel much more intense. So I think that's one of the reasons why these kinds of things became popular, because they cut through that heaviness and that density.
So if you were going to make this at home, would you like take a beer and pour half of it in the can and then take a lemon soda and would it be half and half, or do you have to kind of...
That's kind of the recipe for Brass Monkey, right?
Is it?
Yeah, it's a 40 of Old English, half emptied, and then filled with Tropicana.
Ooh. That does not sound good in the afternoon.
Never doubt the Beastie Boys.
That's good drinking.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I think you would do... if you're going to blend at home, you can begin with your beer and add to taste. And then if you like it sweeter, you can add more and less. And I think... if people who really get into this will find that they have like different brands of sodas and beers that go together because, of course, beers have different profiles. So the hoppier ones probably don't go as well with sweet. So you just find what you like.
I have a question for you, Catherine. Have you ever encountered anyone who puts ice in their wine?
Me.
Okay. Really?
Thank you for that. People do not want to admit that.
I know. My mom does it. And when you were talking about like afternoon and trying not to get too drunk, I think that's partly why she does it. She also likes things really, really cold. So she puts ice in her white wine. Sometimes at restaurants, it used to embarrass me, but now I'm over it.
Oh, I don't do it in restaurants, but in the summer, like I said, there's a 4:30, 5 o'clock moment when I just feel like I just need to relax a little.
And so you have a tiny bit with ice.
And usually I make a spritzer with sparkling water, too. And typically it's something like a white or a rosé that I opened yesterday, so I'm not carrying so much. The flavors aren't quite as fresh anyway. So, yeah, I do it all the time.
Okay.
I totally encourage it.
Cool.
And I don't know if any of you have been to northern Italy, but I'm a big fan of the Aperol Spritz. But once again, that's a wine spritzer that tends to be more alcoholic than wine on its own. Prosecco and Aperol, you can also make it with Campari. And you can add sparkling water, but people rarely do. But that has ice.
Yeah, good point.
I think we should move on to our third course. Let's transition from watered-down drinks to the role of water in the brewery, winery, and distillery. I think we're all aware of the fact that it takes a lot of water to grow the grapes, grains, and hops used to make alcoholic beverages. But most of us are not aware of how important water is in the process of making wine, beer, or liquor. Andy Kryza, you published a fascinating long-form piece in Thrillist back in June that tells the story of a brewery trying to open in Flint, Michigan in the midst of the toxic water crisis. What happened there, and what role does water play in brewing?
Well, the really Cliff's Notes version of the Flint water crisis is that they were trying to cut budget in a perpetually beleaguered city that's been just a Russian doll of terrible things happening for the past 30 years. And they were in the middle of kind of a Portland and Cleveland-inspired food renaissance where they were trying to get people to come to the downtown areas. And what they realized they were missing in one of the greatest brewing states in the Union was a brewery. There was never a brewery in Flint, Michigan. So this place opened up, unbeknownst to them, the water that they were drawing to make the beer was contaminated with enough lead to have killed 12 people at this point through Legionnaire's disease. It's a really horrible situation, but Tenacity Brewing, they were trying to feed a need, and they lucked out in that their water was not contaminated. It was being drawn from the Flint River, which is mortifying considering that Flint, Michigan sits in dead center between two of the largest freshwater sources in the world. But they were the governor was trying to cut corners on budget, and so they started using old pipes from a river that's kind of associated with industrial waste. The water is fine, but the pipes were bad. So this putrid yellow water started coming out. These guys weren't thinking, we should make some rotten egg beer. They happened to be lucky enough that their water was not contaminated. But the fact that they even did it, I think tenacity is not even the best name. It's audacity. I think it's really brave and noble of them to want to do this and to kind of give a shot in the arm to the community. And they had to fight an uphill battle. The minute that they pulled their first tap, this thing went national. Everyone was looking at Flint as synonymous with poisoning people with drinking water. So their story is actually really fascinating. But as with any brewery, they were filtering their water. They were testing their water. They were making sure that it was pure. And putting out as coasters on their bar water reports for the first year that they were in operation. So they kind of had to earn the trust of the people that were going there to drink, either out of morbid curiosity or the fact that they didn't really have any other options. And it impacted the entire food and drink industry in the city. So to that end, I mean, the beer is what, 99% water?
I've heard 95, but yeah, something.
I went to Michigan State. We're not really that good at math. I mean, it's a huge component. People will say, that a New York bagel can't be a New York bagel unless it's made of New York water. So what's going to happen when you're making something that's 95% this water that's got a toxic metal in it? That's absolutely insane and audacious to me.
Wow. So, Jeff and Andy, can you explain for those of us who don't know the brewing process as well as you two do? What does water do? I mean, do they boil it? If you're making beer, what role does water play?
I'll let Jeff take this one.
Well, it's the thing that you start with. So you use water throughout the entire process. You begin by steeping grains in warm water to pull the sugars out of the beer, out of the grain. And then you boil that, and that becomes the sort of basis of the beer. So you use water throughout your cleaning process too, which is probably, you mentioned wine. I was trying to figure out where water would play a role in wine. Typically, historically, people had well water as the source of their water when they were brewing, and so when water is groundwater, it will draw a lot of mineral content from whatever the ground has. So that contributes to the flavor profile of beer, and depending on where in the world you are, you may have very hard water or soft water. It may have carbonate or sulfates. There's a famous brewing town in England that has water that produces. This is what they call it, and it's not a profane thing, so I'm going to warn you. Trigger warning. When you smell this beer, it smells like sulfur, and not the good kind of sulfur, not the burned match sulfur, the rotted egg sulfur, and it's known as the Burton Snatch, and was once regarded as the mark of like ultimate quality, and people really love that. And you can now even many breweries will Burtonize their water to make it taste English. So water can contribute a fair amount of character, though it's not. It's one of those things where if you don't know what you're tasting, it's a little bit hard to identify. It's not as obvious as malt or hops.
So Andy, is there a flavor to this beer from Flint? Is there a flavor that could be attributed to the water?
Absolutely not. I mean, it tastes to me like Portland drinking water coming from there. I mean, they've since had their pipe. Flint has switched back to Detroit water, but the damage has already been done. The pipes that are carrying it still have this contaminant in them. But yeah, no, it just tastes absolutely like any other drinking water. I feel blessed living here and being able to drink tap water here, and it tastes like the tap water I grew up with in Flint before this terrible thing happened. There's no discernible difference if you have it filtered, if you have it purified. If you don't, it's bright yellow and smells like eggs. It's
little bird
but not in that sexy way.
Wow. Well, Hannah, you and I cover wine. I obviously you shouldn't add water to your wine if you're a good winemaker, but I wanted to kind of bring it up because I don't think people realize how much of the cellar process involves hosing things down and swamping things out. I mean, I feel like every time I go into a cellar, the floor is wet, there's a drain in the floor, there are giant hoses, everyone's wearing rubber boots. And it really is a very water-intensive beverage to make, and the crop can be very water-intensive as well.
I don't know much about the production side of the use of water, but I did a story for Modern Farmer a couple of years ago about the Deep Roots Coalition in Oregon, which is a group of wineries that have banded together and will not irrigate no matter what. And I know that sounds easy in Oregon because Oregon has a lot of rain and, but a lot of wineries in Oregon do irrigate, as you know, and especially in dry years. But these people have sort of made a pledge to not irrigate at all. And so that's at least a step in the right direction, I think, for people who want to conserve water. And their wines happen to taste better, in my opinion.
That made wineries sound a lot like a car wash in a lot of ways in my mind, the way that you were describing that.
They really are.
Like the coolest car wash.
They really are, because they're so terrified of contaminants or, some sort of mold or Brettanomyces, which, of course, can be a positive thing in beer. But if you get it in your winery, it gives the wine a funky smell and flavor. So.
Yeah, if it's on the hoof, it's as bad as it is in wine. If you add it, intentionally, it's good. If it just is floating around your brewery, it's bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know of any wineries in Oregon that do rainwater collection and then use that water? I wonder, there's probably someone out there who does that, but
I've seen that, but I can't think offhand of who does that.
And if they do, it probably doesn't, depending on how many containers they have, it probably doesn't last that long, considering how much water they use.
Well, Andy and Jeff, how water intensive is the farming process for a crop like hops?
Beer is insanely water intensive. A good brewery, let's start at the brewery side. A good brewery, kind of an average brewery, will use 7 gallons of water for every gallon of beer it makes. They get worse than that. Some of the very best are around 3 to 1. So that's in the brew house. And that's because it takes water to make the beer and all the cleaning. But barley is a fairly intensive crop. Hops are really very water intensive. There's all the packaging and distribution that it takes to get raw ingredients to the brew house, and then also after when you're shipping it out. So if you look at the entire water footprint of beer, I don't know, it would just be enormous though. So it's a very water intensive crop, and it's one of those things as the planet warms is becoming an issue.
How much does our geographic location in the Pacific Northwest help alleviate that? I mean, we get what, 90, I'm going to do percentages again, like 96, 97% of the hops that go into all beer come from the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah, the ones that are grown in America, right?
So does our natural environment help, or is it supplemented by a lot more irrigation and water?
That is true with the hops. So we definitely get our hops closer than the rest of the country. But the barley is often grown in Canada or the upper Midwest, so the Dakotas. So that's pretty far away. There's increasingly a little bit of artisanal barley that comes from Oregon. But that's shipping it pretty far. So good and bad. One nice thing is we're starting to see, you mentioned that the hops, there's something like 97% of the hops are grown here. 5 years ago, it was 100%. We're starting to see hop fields pop up in places like Michigan and Wisconsin and New York State. So if those commercial hops become viable, local breweries will be able to use those, and then it'll shift, and people in Michigan and Wisconsin will have more access to more local stuff, and they'll be closer to the grain as well.
So, Andy, how's Tenacity doing today? Is it doing well?
They seem to be doing well. I'll be checking in on them next week, in fact. It's one of those situations where the downtown Flint revitalization is largely based on food and drink, and so they're a little off the strip. But when you go to downtown Flint now, you see people flocking there to test out these cocktail bars that are extremely Michigan-heavy brewery or tap houses. That one of them offers, I think, 65 different beers from Michigan. People are getting curious about it, and they're coming back. Tenacity's a little off the beaten path. You have to walk. This is unheard of in Michigan. You have to walk about 5 minutes to get to it. But you go in there. They're having trivia nights. They have stand-up nights. They're just really nice people. Which it's not Midwestern nice, which is kind of passive aggressive. They're actually genuinely excited to see people in there. They told me that I think 65% of their customers that come in are new customers that are curious about what they're doing. They're still experiencing the growing pains of being a new brewery. Usually that takes a year or two to work out. They started in 2015. Their beer's getting better. They're learning what they're doing, and they've kind of, in being the only brewery operating in the city proper, there's one that's like, a half a mile off the city line that didn't have to pivot to get better water because the minute you get out of the city limits, you're fine. It's Lake Huron water. So the fact that they even opened down there with that water supply was brazen, to say the least. But people have learned to trust them, and people have learned to look to them for, Mid-Michigan's little brewing trend community. It seems to be going really well for them.
I love that feel-good story.
Well, they also, the thing that feels best to me about it is Rob Clady, one of the founders of it, told me, he was like, we have no plans to expand. We don't want to open a brewery anywhere else. Like their hashtag is Beer for Flint. They want to give back. They have a charity tap that donates to children's water supply stuff. Flint's such a city of stubborn pride that everyone, I've been gone for 15 years now, and anytime Flint comes up, I'm like prideful of this terrible place that keeps getting, sucker punched by fate. But it's a great city, and to see people using food and drink to create jobs and to create awareness, it warms my heart, and so does the beer sometimes.
It'll do that.
It's so interesting because food and beverage are so resource intensive, but the people who work in food and beverage are often the most generous people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Think about getting a cocktail and wondering if it's laced with lead because of the ice. Oof. That's a horrifying thought, and to be a consumer thinking that you're rolling the dice just getting something or getting a hot dog that might be boiled, it's insane.
Yeah.
And they have had to fight against this stigma ever since that first Dirty Tap poured.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it's time for dessert, in which we each share something foodie or drinky we have been enjoying this week. Actually, maybe we should start with you, Hannah, because you brought a taste.
I did,
test for us.
So I'm a big fan of nut butters, and I was recently reporting a story for Civil Eats about the Red. Do you guys know about the Red? It's this food hub in Southeast Portland, started by EcoTrust, and it's become more than a food hub. They have freezers and sort of cold storage for all kinds of producers, local producers, farmers, ranchers, that kind of thing, fishermen. But they also have some communal kitchens where people can rent out kitchens at a certain time of the day. And there's this company called Ground Up Nut Butters that I discovered when I was reporting this story, and they have incredible flavors. But one of the things I love about what they do, it started by two young women, I think they're in their 20s, maybe their early 30s, and they have a social justice mission. So they hire disadvantaged women who've been either involved in sex trafficking or who have been homeless, and give them jobs, teach them skills, help them gain confidence, and of course an income. And they make these incredible nut butters. So the one I brought was coconut, cardamom, and chia seed. And they're, by the way, locally they're available at New Seasons, most New Seasons, Market of Choice, and Green Zebra.
And the farmers market.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. That's so cool. I didn't know that. Which one? The main one?
I saw them at the main one and at the Alberta.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And then online. So on their website, which I think is groundupnutbutterspdx.com. Something like that. But anyway, they do Oregon hazelnut and almond butter. They do this one called chunky almond, cashew, and coconut butter, which was my favorite that I've had so far. And then there's like a Snickerdoodles one. There's a couple other ones. And they come in small.
That's my daughter's favorite one.
Oh, Snickerdoodles? They come in small and they come in large. So I'm kind of obsessed with them. We can try them after the show.
They actually might go pretty well with some of these spritz drinks we're
Maybe
having.
so.
It's usually hard to pair nut butter with any beverage, but this might work.
I should have brought apples or something to put them on, but...
Jeff, what did you bring for us?
Mine is not something that sounds tasty to me, but I want to talk about the word craft, which is this big word in beer. I got an email press release from a brewery in North Carolina called Catawba, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, who has partnered with Dunkin' Donuts to make a pumpkin spice beer, which uses Dunkin's spice flavorings. And they're talking...
Sorry. This seems like a Xerox of a Xerox.
Yeah. And the press release was just laced with all this stuff about craft. Dunkin' Donuts' craft coffees, which are not craft coffees.
Right. But are they authentic and artisanal?
The whole thing, it just felt like it was through the looking glass that you're using this national donut chain's mass chemical ingredients to put in a beer to make it taste like pumpkin. Originally, the whole craft beer phenomenon got started because the early founders were interested in making something that was non-industrial, that was kind of a return to an artisanal approach and authentic natural flavors. And now we've come back around to this thing which is being marketed as craft. And I saw that and I thought, I think craft is dead. I don't think we can use this word anymore.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that for the last 48 hours or something. So
Did it taste good?
Well, I didn't taste the beer, and I don't want to taste the beer.
Does this mean that Dunkin' Donuts is going to be selling beer? Yeah. And that is just strange. A place known for coffee.
We actually talked about...
You should have used air quotes on coffee there.
Yeah. We talked on this podcast a while back about weird collaborations, and this is one of those weird oddball collaborations that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but, Right. I don't know.
To me, it opens the door for Doritos beer, which I've been dreaming about since I was a kid. But,
Isn't it enough to just eat Doritos with your beer?
That's the we call that the New Mexico Shandy.
What's wrong with the world?
Sorry.
Andy, what did you bring for us for dessert?
So I brought something not only that I've been enjoying, but I think everyone should be enjoying, which is beers from the Gorge.
Columbia River Gorge?
The Columbia River Gorge, yes. So the Columbia River Gorge is currently on fire, not as much as it used to be. But through this all, craft breweries have been operating. Some of the better craft breweries in the great state of Oregon have been operating. There's an organization called Breweries in the Gorge that gives you a map and a passport to go and check out these places. They're still operating. They're small businesses that, have weathered a bit of loss as a result of these fires. And it's a good opportunity to go out and drink beer and support local businesses and, see that the Gorge is still the Gorge, which a lot of us are terrified that it's not, but it is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of been my mission, is to drink philanthropically to support the Gorge.
Is the highway open now? Because a couple weekends ago, you still had to go on the Washington side. We went to Eastern.
I believe it reopened, yeah. The Oregon side, I believe, is reopened. Oh, okay. But there are great Gorge breweries on the Washington side as well. So.
For my dessert, I'm going to talk about the fig tree in my backyard. I'm actually going to talk about weather because I think it's a Marseille fig tree. The fruit is kind of white, or the flesh is kind of white, and it's actually not that sweet. It kind of tastes like honey, but it's something that's a little more restrained, so I like it in a salad. Anyway, I try to harvest the figs from my tree before they fall to the ground and all the little rodents come and destroy my garden. But I noticed we had some rain the other day, and now I can't eat my figs because the skin's kind of peeled off and they're getting kind of yucky and mushy. And it just made me think, we're so dependent on these crops that we eat. We see them in the grocery store. They're so beautiful, but just a little bit of rain can ruin an entire crop, and we don't often think about that.
Do you know about the Portland Fruit Tree Project?
I do. I keep meaning to sign up for that.
They come and they'll pick it and take it away and give it to someone else if you don't have time. But in this case, you wanted to pick it. You just didn't get around to doing it.
Yeah,
fast
but maybe the fruit will dry out. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
A little more sun. A special thanks to our amazing panelists, Andy Kryza, who recently ranked the top 19 types of food snobs for Thrillist.
Woo!
Do any of us fall into any of those categories?
I mean, you did just talk about figs quite a bit.
And Jeff Alworth, who can also be found on the Beervana podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And Hannah Wallace, who tried marijuana for the readers of Vogue. I love that you wrote about marijuana for Vogue. There's just something funny about that.
It was a lot of fun, I have to say.
Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. You can read all about us on the OPB website. Our producer is Alex Ward. Special thanks to OPB sound supervisor Stephen Cray, and our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. If you like our James Beard Award-winning show, please help us out. Rate us on iTunes, subscribe to The Four Top on your favorite podcast app, and please tell your friends about us. You can tweet us at @4top, all one word, or visit our Facebook page and post your thoughts about the show. We'd love to hear from you. Bye-bye now.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.
Is this one of those weird tip included podcasts?